Hello, how are you doing today? I trust you are having a wonderful or relaxed or a contented day. If not, why not? When you really look at perception of things, if you're feeling stressed, or any feeling, where is that feeling? Is it external or is it internal? You know, this realm is all about timing and coincidence. It's a series of feedback loops. Now, how many of you out there, if I mention 1111, will know straight away the type of thing I'm talking about? Now, many people will dismiss that as coincidence. That's the topic of what may end up as 2 videos, because before making this, what are called spiritual downloads, the information is just coming, but where is it coming from? Now, a lot of people will dismiss the timing. Timing is everything, but they will dismiss the timing because their perception is one of linear time as the only time. Far from it. There is a beauty in timing. It remains to be seen, but on law of averages, I will often get comments saying that's just what I needed to hear. How many times have you experienced where you go on YouTube and something seems to fall in your lap, just the thing you were looking for, or you see something or hear something in a video and it answers a question you may have. Incidentally, before I forget it, only this morning I'm looking at what I think is a magnolia tree with the seed pods. They look very much like green beans. Now I'm thinking about how the seeds will create a protege, another of that species of tree. If we take something like the dandelion or the thistle, those seeds are sort of blown through the air, but these seed pods, they're not going to fly through the air in the same way. So I'm thinking about, well, not exactly thinking as such, trying to get the answer, just sort of out of curiosity, putting the thought out there. And I'm sitting there in front of this magnolia tree, and it's like this pea shooter. The seed pods actually explode and project the seed out. Maybe that is the origin of the cannonball and the story behind that, the projectile method or the explosive method of creating something new. But obviously the cannonball is its counterpart duality. It's destructive. It's a wrecking ball. It's going to destroy. Is that coincidence? So I'm going to pick a couple of examples of coincidence. And yes, it may come in this video that it's coincidental when you start the video. If you notice the time, something may draw your eye to, or even the length of this video, who knows. At this stage, I could not tell you. But where is this information coming from? Well, it's an often quoted saying that I of myself can do nothing, which is absolutely true, but it is not coming from me. But it is coming from I in the singular, in the first person sense. If that makes sense. But if it doesn't make sense, it's maybe your perspective on the words and how you're hearing them. So on to a little example of coincidences. That's something that sort of shows something isn't quite right, things don't add up, things aren't in balance. Unlike the letter H, the 2 pillars with the level in the middle. Symbolically, the capital H shows you something. It follows the letter T very often in English, like there, they are, thee, thy, thou. The thee, the thy, and the thou, of course, are all very much associated biblically with this God or this Creator. But as I've said many times before, and it's reiterating what Neville Goddard says, there is only one player. There is one, which is a capital I. But when the level is at its highest level, it becomes a T. It's a sort of depiction of the Creator. It's quite amusing when you look at the word coincidence. You've got the letter C 3 times in that word. It's a coincidence. Or is it a coincidence that the first C is a hard sounding K, but the other 2 C's sound like an S? Is there a coincidence in that word? Human energy is what empowers everything. Words have no power, do they, after all? But we're taught to compartmentalize those words and only hear them with one perception. So imagine, if you will, and this is sort of an interesting exercise of going back to basics and start again, unlearning and then relearning. So the premise I want you to go with is, you know how to pronounce the letters, but no one has told you where to put the syllable breaks in the words. So how would you hear coincidence? How would you break that word up? There are many ways of breaking it up. Straight away you can see co, you can see in, you can see inside, you can see dense, you can see dense with a T in S instead of a C and an E. The sound is the same, but the spell is very, very different. But coincidence, is there such a thing as a coincidence? When we look at the definition from a Google search, just typing in coincidence definition, it gives you straight away 2 answers. A remarkable concurrence of events or circumstances without apparent causal connection. Well, that's exactly true. Without apparent, there is no apparition. It comes from the unseen. So that statement can be seen as true or untrue, depending on your view on what is a coincidence and whether there is such a thing as a coincidence. I would say the answer is both yes and no. The other definition is the fact of corresponding in nature or in time of occurrence. Well, occurrence, well, that's implying ocular, something you see, not necessarily with the eyes, but something you see in the mind. The fact of corresponding in nature or in time. So something that's natural or something that is subject to time. So let's face it, many people are governed by time. Oh, it's 6 o'clock. It's time for dinner, for example. Oh, it's 8 o'clock. I must get up and go to work. There's 2 examples of where time is something that governs. So it's more than just linear. I'm sorry this is going off on several tangents at once. But anyway, we'll come back to a couple of examples. Now, put in American Civil War. And you'll look at the wiki answer. And it tells you it's between 1861 and 1865, if I remember this correctly. Now look in the time that they were building the east to west coast railway line. And you'll find that occurs in, I think it's 1863 to 1865. Well, hold on. There's a civil war going on, but there's a railroad being built. Things don't add up there. Now another example, let's take the Cold War throughout the 1950s and 60s, where the communist bloc had missiles lined up against the NATO powers of Western Europe and the division of Germany into two countries, or into two nations. But then it's like, well, hold on a minute, what about the Bering Straits? It's about 50 to 60 miles that separates Russia from the United States, or part of the United States, which is Alaska. But were there any missiles lined up? I'm sorry about the noise if you heard that. That's Biggie having a bit of a coughing fit, I think. Anyway, I digress. Back to topic. So there's two things. There's a pattern starts to emerge that things don't add up. Now, is that a coincidence? Right, we're up to 10 minutes and 44 seconds. Now, is that a coincidence? So this will be the end of part one. We'll get on to the breakdown of the etymology and what that reveals in part two. Hopefully this has revealed something about this reality and the appearance of it being dualistic and how it is a contrast. Because it is by having the contrast that you can distinguish one from the other. Distinguish is another very interesting word. So, for example, I could say to you, let me introduce a very distinguished guest. But how are you hearing guest? Am I making a guess in the past tense, or is it a guest as in you've invited somebody to come and talk? But distinguish, that's the key word. Where do you distinguish? It's an inside job. It's your discernment, what you can distinguish in the external from the contrasts that are given without judgment on something being good or bad. Because if you cannot distinguish and you are just focusing externally totally and looking externally for the answers, something that is outside, like as opposed to terrestrial, you have extraterrestrial. You can also be extinguished from without. What you consume can consume you. So we've gone on a little bit longer than I originally planned. So end of part one, and love to you all.